If you've ever been told you're not enough, this story might sound a little too familiar. The first time someone told me I couldn't afford something, I was 16 and standing in a thrift store with my mom. We were looking for a prom dress, and the cashier, God bless her bluntness, looked me up and down and said, "Honey, maybe you should check the clearance rack." I laughed it off back then, but those words, "maybe you should check the clearance rack," somehow made a home in my heart. They whispered to me every time I wanted something that felt out of reach. And years later, those same words echoed again, only this time, it wasn't a dress for prom. It was a dress for my own wedding. It all started the day my fiancé, Michael, and I got engaged. We'd met at church 2 years before, me, a wedding planner's assistant, just trying to make ends meet. Him, a carpenter who always smelled faintly of sawdust and coffee. We weren't fancy people. But when he proposed, in the middle of a Christmas lights display, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. "Let's keep it simple," I told him, that night my hands still shaking with excitement. "A small ceremony. Maybe 50 people." He smiled. "Whatever makes you happy." But the thing about weddings is, they bring out sides of people you didn't know existed, especially when it comes to family. My sister, Danielle, was the first to weigh in. 50 people? That's basically a backyard barbecue, Lily. And Mom, bless her heart, chimed in with, "Sweetheart, I know money's tight, but maybe we can still make it look decent." Money, tight. The word hung between us like smoke. They weren't wrong. After my dad passed away, bills piled up faster than we could open them. Mom worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, and I'd been sending her money when I could. Michael and I were saving, but most days it felt like we were just trying to keep our heads above water. So when I went to try on wedding dresses, I went alone. The shop smelled like roses and perfume, and everything was so white it made me nervous to breathe. The consultant, a tall woman with a sleek ponytail, asked me what my budget was. I told her. She blinked. Oh. It wasn't a small O either. It was the kind of O people use when they're trying not to laugh. "Well," she said, "we don't have much in that range, but I suppose we can look at our sample rack." The clearance rack. Again. As she disappeared into the back, I stood there, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and I was wearing jeans that had a coffee stain on the knee. I didn't look like someone getting married. I looked like someone out of place. When she came back, she held up a dress that looked tired, like it had seen too many dressing rooms and not enough joy. "This one's discounted. We can tailor it to fit you, sort of." Sort of. I tried it on anyway. The fabric was scratchy, the fit wrong, and as I stood there under those harsh lights, I could almost hear that 16-year-old version of myself whispering again, "Maybe you should check the clearance rack." I swallowed hard, changed back into my clothes, and thanked the woman for her time. Outside, it was raining. Lightly, but enough that I could feel it seeping through my sweater. I sat in my car, tears blurring the windshield, and I prayed. Not a big, dramatic prayer, just a quiet one. "Lord, I don't need the perfect dress. I just need peace. Please help me find peace." A few days later, I got a call from an old friend, Jessica. We'd worked together years ago before she'd moved to Atlanta to start a wedding design business. "Lily," she said, her voice all sunshine, "I heard you're getting married. When's the big day?" We caught up for a while, and I tried to sound cheerful, but she could tell something was off. "Be honest with me," she said finally. "What's wrong?" So I told her about the budget, the dress, the way everyone made me feel like I was settling for scraps. There was a pause. Then she said softly, "You've always been the one to make other people's weddings beautiful. Let me help make yours that way too." "Jess, I can't afford—" "Stop. I didn't ask if you could afford it. I'm offering it. Let me do this." Her kindness broke something open in me. For the first time in weeks, I cried tears that weren't from shame. 2 weeks later, she showed up in town with boxes, literal boxes of gowns, fabrics, candles, and decorations. My living room looked like a wedding showroom exploded. And for once, I didn't feel embarrassed. "Try this one," she said, handing me a gown wrapped in soft tissue paper. "It's a sample from one of my designers. Never worn, never sold. I think it was waiting for you." I slipped it on, and when I turned to the mirror, I didn't even recognize myself. The dress was simple, lace sleeves, an open back, a train that shimmered when I moved, but it was perfect. Jess smiled. "See? You didn't need to afford it. You just needed someone to believe you deserved it." I laughed through my tears. "You're an angel." She shrugged. "Just a friend with a good storage closet." But not everyone was thrilled. When I told Danielle about the dress, she rolled her eyes. "So someone gave it to you? Wow, that's sweet, I guess." And at dinner that night, Mom frowned. "Lily, I don't want people thinking you're taking handouts. You've always been proud." "I'm not taking handouts. I'm accepting grace." She didn't respond, but I saw her expression soften just a little. Still, that night lying in bed with Michael, I couldn't shake the feeling that people were waiting for me to fail, waiting for proof that I wasn't good enough to pull off something beautiful. But Michael kissed my forehead and said, "You're marrying me, and that's all that matters. Let them talk." And I believed him until the day of the wedding, because that was the day everything changed. It started with a whisper. A few murmurs among guests as they arrived. I was upstairs, finishing my makeup when Danielle burst into the room. "Lily, did you see who's downstairs?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" She leaned in. "Your guest list is insane. There are people down there who drive Bentleys. What did you do?" I froze, because I hadn't invited anyone like that. Not yet. Anyway. And that's when I heard Michael's voice downstairs, calm, steady, greeting someone I never expected to see again. Someone who changed everything. When I walked down the stairs, my heart pounding under that lace bodice, the last thing I expected to see was Mr. Everett. He was standing by the entryway, shaking hands with my fiancé. Clean suit, polished shoes, the kind of presence that fills a room even when he's quiet. Mr. Everett? I said, my voice catching. He turned, smiling that same calm smile I remembered from years ago. Lily, it's been a long time. Too long. Mr. Everett had been my boss back when I worked as an assistant wedding planner in Nashville. He was kind but strict, the kind of man who taught you that excellence wasn't optional. When I left that job, I did it quietly, after my mom got sick and I couldn't keep up. I never thought I'd see him again. What are you doing here? I stammered. He chuckled. Jess invited me. Jessica, of course. She mentioned she was helping with your wedding, and when I realized it was you, the one who once saved my daughter's ceremony from collapsing, I had to come. I blinked. I saved her wedding? He nodded. The florist canceled at the last minute. You stayed up all night arranging grocery store flowers into centerpieces. My wife still talks about it. His tone softened. You've always had a gift, Lily. I'm honored to be here. I didn't know what to say. I felt like that same small-town girl again, standing in a bridal shop where I didn't belong. Except now, people I admired were showing up for me. Downstairs, the room buzzed. Chandeliers glowed warm gold against wooden beams. The scent of white roses filled the air. The guests were a mix of family, friends, and apparently some of Nashville's most prominent business owners. Jessica had gone all out. When I caught Danielle's eye across the room, her expression was unreadable. She leaned toward Mom and whispered something, and they both glanced my way. Michael came up behind me, resting a hand on my back. You okay? I think so. Just overwhelmed. He smiled. That's a good thing today. But then Danielle approached, her heels clicking on the wood floor like punctuation marks. So, she said, folding her arms, you just happen to invite a millionaire or two? Jess invited them, I said. Right, because your friends just happen to know people like that. I sighed. Danielle, can we not do this today? But she wasn't done. You've always been good at pretending, Lil. The perfect smile, the nice dress, but everyone knows you can't really afford all this. The words hit like a slap. Michael tensed beside me. Enough, he said. Danielle scoffed. I'm just being honest. Mom agrees. Danielle? Mom's voice cut through the noise. She stepped forward, looking pale. Mom never took sides. Mom looked at me, her eyes softer than I'd seen in years. Lily, I was wrong to make you feel small for needing help. I see this now, and I see how loved you are. That's worth more than money. Tears stung my eyes. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Jessica appeared at my side, smiling like she'd been waiting for the cue. Actually, she said, turning to the small crowd forming nearby, there's something you all should know. I turned to her, startled. Jess, what are you... But she just winked. Trust me. A few minutes later, the guests took their seats. The ceremony was simple, bathed in golden afternoon light. Michael looked at me like I was the only person in the world. But as the music began to fade and the vows ended, Jessica stepped forward again, holding a small microphone. Before we celebrate, she said, I'd like to share a story about Lily. I froze. Jessica smiled at me. Lily doesn't know I'm doing this, but she deserves to be seen for who she really is. The room went still. Years ago, Jessica said, I was starting my business with nothing but a few contacts and a prayer. I was about to lose my first big client when my assistant, this woman right here, stepped in helping me pull off a wedding that saved my company. And she refused to take a dime more than her paycheck. She paused, glancing at me. That same heart that helps quietly, gives freely, and never asks for recognition, that's the reason so many of us are here today. You see, Lily didn't just plan her wedding, she inspired it. Gasps and soft applause filled the air. I covered my mouth, trying not to cry. Jessica continued. When I told some of my clients about her story, they wanted to help too. That's why some of the people here today, like Mr. Everett and the Dunhams, and the folks from Harmony Catering, donated their time, space, and services, not as charity, but as gratitude, because Lily once gave without expecting anything back. The room blurred. My breath caught in my throat. Danielle's hand went to her mouth. Mom dabbed at her eyes. And suddenly, everything made sense. The expensive linens, the 5-tier cake, the cars outside that didn't belong in our small town. It wasn't pity. It was love being returned. After the ceremony, people came up to hug me, people I'd once served coffee to during long nights of planning their events. They told me I'd inspired them, helped them, reminded them that kindness matters. When Mr. Everett hugged me, he said quietly, "You didn't need to afford the dress, Lily. You earned something better, respect." I nodded, unable to speak. Later, when the music started and laughter filled the air, I found Danielle outside on the porch, staring out at the lake. She didn't turn when I walked up. "You know," she said softly, "I think I've spent half my life trying to make sure no one ever looked down on me. But I guess I've been the one doing the looking down." I swallowed. "You're my sister. You don't have to prove anything." Her voice cracked. "I was jealous, Lil. You had less, but somehow people loved you more. I couldn't understand it." I put a hand on her shoulder. "It's not about more or less. It's about grace. You just have to let people love you back." She finally looked at me, eyes red. "You really believe that?" "I do." She let out a shaky laugh. "Well, maybe you should start planning my wedding next. You seem to have good connections now." We both laughed, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel forced. That night, as the guests left and the stars came out, Michael and I stood in the glow of fairy lights, holding each other. "You did it," he whispered. "We did it," I said. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about us. It was about every time I'd been told I couldn't. Every voice that said I wasn't enough. Every whisper that said, "Maybe you should check the clearance rack." Because tonight, standing there in a dress that once felt too good for me, surrounded by people who had chosen to show up not because of what I had, but because of who I was, I finally believed the truth. I had never been lacking. I had simply been waiting for the right people to see me. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The house was quiet, the soft hum of the fridge the only sound. My dress hung over a chair in the corner, lace catching the early light like it had been spun from memory itself. Michael was still asleep, his hand resting loosely on my side. I slipped out of bed, wrapped myself in a robe, and walked outside to the porch. The air was crisp, the kind that makes you breathe a little deeper. I looked out at the lake, still calm from the night before, and for the first time in years, I felt full. Not of things or plans or fears, just full of peace. It's strange the way life loops back, how the things that once wounded you somehow lead you to the exact place you needed to heal. When I was 16, standing in that thrift store, I thought worth came from what you could afford. When I was 28, walking into that bridal shop, I thought it came from what people thought you could. But standing there that morning, barefoot, in the soft chill, I realized worth isn't given, it's lived. And grace? Well, grace is what you give when someone else forgets that. A week later, Mom invited us over for Sunday lunch. She'd made her famous pot roast and mashed potatoes, and for once, the house didn't feel heavy. There was laughter again. Real, easy laughter. As she poured sweet tea into glasses, she looked at me and said, "You know, your dad would have been proud of you." I smiled. "You think so?" "I know so," she said, nodding firmly. "He always said you had his heart. Maybe not his luck, but definitely his heart." Her voice softened. "I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like what you had wasn't enough. I just didn't want you to struggle the way we did." "I know, Mom." I reached over and squeezed her hand, "but I think struggle's what made me grateful." Danielle was quiet for a moment, then grinned. "You two are gonna make me cry in my mashed potatoes." We all laughed, and something inside me shifted again, because that's what healing really looks like. It's not dramatic. It's just the quiet return of laughter where pain used to live. Later that night, after dishes were done and Michael and I were heading home, I found a small envelope tucked into my purse. Mom's handwriting. When I opened it, there was a note. "You've always seen beauty where others saw broken things. Don't ever stop doing that." And tucked inside, a photo of my parents on their wedding day. Dad in a gray suit, Mom in a simple white dress, smiling like they had found everything they needed in that moment. On the back, Mom had written, "The dress doesn't make the marriage. Love does." Months passed, and life fell into its gentle rhythm again. I went back to work. This time, I started taking on my own clients. Jessica helped me set up my business, and she wouldn't let me pay her for half of it. When I asked her why, she said, "You helped me when I had nothing. Consider this the return on investment." I laughed. "Then I hope this business blesses more people than either of us expect." And it did. Slowly, my name started circulating. Lily Grace Weddings. It had a ring to it, pun intended. But it wasn't just about the business. It was about the people who came through my doors. The brides who cried because their budgets didn't match their dreams. The families who argued over centerpieces because they were really scared about change. I knew how to talk to them now. How to remind them what mattered most. A year after our wedding, I was setting up for an event at a small church in Franklin. A nervous young bride was pacing by the window, twisting her engagement ring. She said, "I just wish everything looked nicer," her voice trembling. "My dress isn't even new. My cousin wore it before me." I smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Can I tell you something?" She nodded, blinking back tears. "The dress doesn't make the marriage. Love does." She laughed softly, wiping her eyes. "That's easy for you to say. You probably had one of those fairy tale weddings." I smiled. "Oh, sweetheart, you'd be surprised." And as I helped her down the aisle later, watching the light catch on that borrowed lace, I realized something profound. Maybe the most beautiful things in life aren't the ones we can afford. They're the ones that cost us humility, forgiveness, and faith. That evening, I drove home just as the sky turned to gold. Michael was on the porch again, building something, a small wooden table for the nursery. "Hey," he said, smiling, as I stepped onto the car. "How'd the wedding go?" "Beautiful," I said. "Simple, real." He grinned. "Just like ours?" I laughed. "Exactly like ours." He put down the hammer, wiping his hands on a rag. "You know, I never got to thank Just properly, or Mr. Everett, or any of those people. They didn't do it for thanks," I said quietly. "They did it because they saw something good in us. Sometimes that's enough." He nodded. "Still, we should pay it forward somehow." I looked at the table, half finished and beautiful in its imperfection. "We already are," I whispered. That night, after dinner, we sat by the fire, and I pulled out a scrapbook Jess had made from the wedding, photos of us dancing, Mom laughing, Danielle wiping away tears she pretended weren't there.
On the last page in Jessica's looping handwriting, she had written, "They said you couldn't afford the dress, but what they didn't know is you were never meant to buy it. You were meant to grow into it." I closed the book and leaned against Michael's shoulder, watching the firelight flicker, because maybe that's what grace really looks like. Not something handed to us, but something we learn to walk in, even when we don't feel worthy. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, I thought of all the women out there who still hear those same words I once did, that they're too little, too late, too less. I hope they know what I finally learned, that no matter what they wear, what they earn, or where they've been told they don't belong, they are already enough.